This is an example of how banks, in my opinion, would use XRP for cross-border payments. Okay, today I'm going to show you the R3 Corda, the $10 billion in tokenized assets used by the banks, XDC Validators, how they're securing the network right now, RWA.xyz, the platform for real-world assets, and a little bit of my XRP simulator and how central banks could be using AMMs. Stay tuned. This is crazy. R3 Corda. Their focus has been mostly on the banks. So the future of financial markets is digital. What does this mean? Well, they're tokenizing real-world assets. And what is the real-world asset? That's the titles on the network, the bonds on the network. And as we saw in my last videos, like for example, the credit agencies are coming in and rating these assets that are living on the chain. And the name of the game is to borrow against it. So if banks can borrow against these assets on chain, they can create money because debt is money. But this is a private network, so it's a centralized network. Why is this important? Because their focus back in 2021, R3 Corda, they had a bridge to the Ethereum-based XDC. And I talked about in the past how XDC is pretty much a copy-paste of Ethereum. And I think Ethereum's a lot better than Solana, but I'll explain why. So Solana, well, first let me show you. So their focus right now is on the Solana toolkit. Solana has gone down in 2021, 2022, May 2022, June 2022, September 2022, February 2023, February 2024. And of course, there's less things that are going wrong, but I just don't like the fact that it can go down. It basically says that this is not decentralized, it's a centralized network. XDC is based on Ethereum, and we have never seen Ethereum go down, at least not recently. It has had some issues in the past, but that has been resolved. So what to watch for with R3 Corda is right now they're focused on Solana. I think they're going to pivot towards XDC because XDC has the ISO compliance. They also have the money and the banks backed. So we're going to be watching for them. One thing I want to show you for the Ripple people is that we've seen an open source version of Corda, and so that networks can work on it, including a payment engine said to be interoperable with Ripple's XRP currency, because I think that's going to be a store of value that people will use for settlement. I mean, XDC is great, but store of value is going to be in XRP. It's going to be both. So the more people use XRP and the more people use XDC, the prices, in my opinion, is going to rise. XinFin and XDC community is based out of Singapore for taxes, in my opinion. And their founder, their co-founder, talks about how XDC is a public network, a decentralized public network. I mean, I guess it's somewhat centralized, but it's a public network and should appease regulators' concerns among banks and financial institutions eyeing the potential for more open blockchains. Why is this important? Well, as we're going from the old system to the new system, the whole point of the channel is, like, for example, right now everyone's focused on Solana because the fees are low, but I personally think because of all the outages, and I still think they're working on it, we're going to see more of an adoption towards XDC. On top of the ISO standard, XDC also has the validators. The validators are important because, as the founder stated, they get to know your customer for the node. Now, if a bank gets to basically know who's running the node, that's beneficial. So right now, Solana has the validators, but I don't think they have the know your customer, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the validators are going to be, in my opinion, going to be run by the banks. So if right now we're in the testing phase, but I think it's about 500,000 right now to become a validator. But you had to register with XDC Foundation, XinFin, as to say, hey, we want to be a part of your network. And they also have the ISO standard. And in my last video, they were also invited to their foundation to basically build this type of network. And as I said in the past, the name of the game is to borrow against assets on chain for liquidity. So speaking of liquidity, RWA.xyz, the platform I showed you in my last video, there's a little chart of what's going on. Now, this is for institutional investors. Right now, U.S. Treasury debt, commodities, public equity, institutional alternatives, private credit. And as you see, the increase that's moving on chain. So all these assets are moving on chain. And the name of the game is debt. So these are the few networks, and I'm going to be breaking down this whole platform more in my future videos, so stay tuned. As promised, the XRP AMM simulator. So this is an example of how banks, in my opinion, would use XRP for cross-border payment. 58.9 trillion, which makes sense because you need to facilitate global trade. And I know they're using it already, but the Swift fee is about $25 to $50. And so I made like a debt clock. So let's say it's $10. You know, let's do something crazy. 580. We have the liquidity pool that I talked about in my last video, 58.9 trillion, which makes sense because you need to facilitate global trade. And then your fees are about 99.9% because think about it, it's less than a penny. And the current price is $25 to $50. So if the Federal Reserve, their volume is 2.1, European Central Bank 1.8 trillion, that's daily. Like, this is not financial advice. This is just, I didn't really check all these numbers. I just built it real quick. So about 3 to 5 days, XRP 3 to 5 seconds. So that's the benefits there. And this is kind of what it would look like. I think the benefit would be like to have a global system that everyone can track and look on chain of what's going on. Makes sense to me. But yeah, like I said, simulation only. I'll do more videos on this. If you like this stuff, just let me know. I want to hear what you think. I just really love this stuff, and I'm looking forward to seeing you in my next video. Thanks.